everyone, and welcome to Banfield. Ashleigh has the night off. I'm Laura Ingle. I'm so glad that you're here. We have a huge show for you tonight. And of course, we're all talking about the Menendez case. Lyle and Eric Menendez waited 28 years to get another day in court. And now they're going to have to wait a little bit longer. You may have heard today a judge postponed their resentencing hearing until the new year, pretty much dashing their hopes of being released by Christmas. Now, there's still a slim possibility, but really slim, like Christmas miracle slim. We've also learned about a new development in Lyle Menendez's personal life that could possibly hurt his chances of being released at all. I'll tell you about it in just a moment. Diddy, he's in the news today, too. He's also being kept in suspense over his latest crack at bail. Now, a federal judge is still making up his mind, with prosecutors and Team Diddy each accusing the other of sabotaging a fair trial. We'll take you inside the latest back and forth and tell you what's on the Thanksgiving Day menu at the Metropolitan Detention Center, the MDC. Plus, it's been almost 3 decades since the tragic murder of 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey. Now, the case may be cold, but it is far from closed, thanks in large part to the diligence of JonBenét's father, John Ramsey, in keeping the investigation and JonBenét's story alive. A brand new Netflix docuseries dropped just today. And John Ramsey joins me live later this hour. It's still not impossible, but home for the holidays is looking less and less likely for Lyle and Eric Menendez. Just a month ago, a Netflix series had brought a lot of attention, a lot of new attention to their case. And the LA District Attorney supported their full release from prison. You remember this. But then that DA lost his re-election bid. And today, a judge postponed a long-awaited hearing on resentencing to give the new DA time to weigh in. Makes sense, right? Well, the hearing had been set for December 11th, but will now take place over the last 2 days in January. Mark your calendars. The brothers got bad news at the status hearing today. It was their first court hearing in 28 years. People were lined up around the block to get in. And it didn't look good from the very beginning. There were technical issues with the live feed from prison, so Lyle and Eric didn't actually appear virtually as planned. They had to listen in on the phone. 2 of their elderly aunts did testify on their behalf, their mother's 92-year-old sister, Joan, and their father's 85-year-old sister, Terry. They both told the judge it's time for the brothers to be freed. We've heard this before. 24 others in the family agree, and only one, Kitty's brother, Milton. He's opposed. He is fiercely opposed. The brothers do have other paths to freedom. A habeas corpus petition is making its way through the system. And California Governor Gavin Newsom could still grant clemency at any time. But he says he doesn't plan to do so until the new DA is up to speed. So, back in June, I was interviewing the brothers' lead attorney, Mark Garagos, at CrimeCon. We were in Nashville, and this is when Lyle Menendez called into the panel, live on stage. I asked him what he and Eric planned to do if they were released. Here's what he told me.
Can you please tell our audience what you plan on doing if you do get this chance to be released? What will you and your brother do?
Well, I'm hoping that I've had these discussions with corrections officials who are in charge of letting formerly incarcerated people return to the prisons to do good work, and they are definitely open to and would like me to continue to work on this idea of transforming prison yards so that it creates living environments and communities that produce better neighbors.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
So I hope to do that, and then I probably will, as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, I've had talks with Rosie O'Donnell about creating a foundation where we would go and try to speak to those kind of forums and those groups and help in that space. It's an area that I've spent a lot of my time in, forming groups in here with, as you're probably aware, a lot of the prisoners childhoods and come from difficult circumstances. And so I've formed groups where they can more confidently talk about that.
I got to tell you, that phone call was crazy because we were backstage when Lyle Menendez started to call in, and we weren't sure if it was going to happen. Mark Garagos we couldn't even mic it up correctly, so Mark Garagos had to take his cell phone and hold it up to his microphone that he had on his shirt on stage. Anyway, you heard it there. And Lyle Menendez is also making headlines for another reason. His wife just announced that she and Lyle have been separated for some time now, after 21 years of marriage. The announcement comes just days after the Daily Mail reported that Lyle is in a relationship with a 21-year-old student who has traveled to California from her home in Britain to visit him. I'm joined now by Alexandria Kazarian, another of Lyle and Eric's attorneys, and by Robert Rand, award-winning journalist and author of the book, The Menendez Murders. Thank you both for being here. What a day. Alexandra, let's start with you. Your reaction to judge's decision to postpone, what do you think? I mean, I think a lot of people saw this could be coming, right? Maybe a setback, part of the process, the tech issues today, couldn't see the brothers. What did you make of it all?
The tech issues were par for the course. If everything had gone smoothly, I would have been shocked and I would have bought like 15 lottery tickets because I've been in that courtroom and I've been in every courtroom in Los Angeles and I've never had a WebEx appearance from prison go well the first time. And, you add press in there and the entire world watching, you just had to know that that wasn't going to go well. But who I did miss seeing was Robert. I didn't see you there. I can't believe that we missed each other. Usually I get to see you and say hi. But Robert, I think it went great.
Yeah, Robert, I heard you were in the overflow room. Describe what that was like.
That's right. Well, in the overflow room, we actually had access to video and audio from the courtroom. So it was like we were there in the courtroom because we saw and heard everything. We were expecting to see Eric and Lyle Menendez, via Zoom or WebEx. And that didn't work out. But there was very powerful testimony from Jose Menendez's sister, Terry Baralt, and Kitty Menendez's sister, Joan Vandermolen. And many people probably don't know who Terry Baralt is because she was a key witness in the second trial of the brothers. And during the penalty phase of that trial, after the brothers had been convicted of first-degree murder, Terry Baralt made an impassioned, emotional plea for them to not be killed, to not get the death sentence. And she said, there's been enough killing in this family. Please let them live.
Alexandra, I want to ask you back to being in the courtroom today and looking at everything that was going on and looking at the momentum that was going into this moment. I mean, 28 years. That's a really long time to wait to get a crack at being in front of a judge. So take me through your perspective legally of what we heard today and how likely it is where we're going to get to this next hearing.
When you look at a resentencing petition, what the judge is considering is whether these are people who have been rehabilitated. The underlying facts of the crime are not what's at issue. We know what happened. They were convicted. That's not the point. Resentencing is, after all of these years, what have they been doing with their life? And have they proven that they are no longer a threat to society? And I've said it before, and I'll say it so many times, these two brothers are the most rehabilitated people I've ever seen. They've come up with their own programs while inside of prison that benefit other people. They're not benefiting themselves because they never had a hope that they were actually going to be released once their appeals were all dashed. Once the appeals were denied, they started working on how to make life better for people that had plans to be released. And so everything that they've done has been for others, and they are prime candidates for these new resentencing laws. And hearing from the family who are the victims, they're not just family and supporters. These are the victims in the case. These are family members of the people who passed. And it's very powerful to hear victims say that these people have been rehabilitated. I know them. I speak to them often, and I want them out.
But let's talk about Milton for a second, right? I mean, we have heard from the other family member that he doesn't want these boys to be out, or they're not boys anymore, but he doesn't want the brothers to be out. Robert, what is your take on that? And I heard that his attorney was there today.
Well, there was actually a bombshell about Milton Anderson that was revealed by Joan Vandermolen, in which she said that Milton was abused as a child and that my dad, Andy, was not a good father. And that was something I'd never heard in 35 years of covering the case. So that's kind of a bombshell. But what really was important was the powerful testimony of Terry Beralt and Joan Vandermolen. I wanted to read a couple quick quotes from Terry Beralt. She said, "Yes, it's been 35 years, but something happened in that house. I would like to hug them and see them at home, not in jail." And then Joan Vandermolen said, "No child should have to endure what Eric and Lyle did, and Kitty, her sister, knew about what was happening." Joan also said, "It's time for them to come home. I want to hug them in person again." But as I said, the biggest bombshell of the day was that Joan said that her brother Milton had been abused by their father when he was growing up.
And you had never heard that before?
No.
And you've been covering this for so long. You've written the book. Alexandra, tomorrow is the deadline for the DA to respond to your habeas corpus filing, asking court to consider new evidence that the brothers were molested by their father. So will that be punted to the new DA too, do you think? How is this going to all work out? And what do you make of the new DA, by the way?
I appreciate that he's taking his time and that he hasn't really come out one way or the other because he hasn't really dug into the case. I don't think that he realizes that this resentencing is not about the underlying facts in the case, but it's about rehabilitation. So I think that he does have some catching up to do when it comes to understanding the difference between a habeas and a resentencing. But I appreciate that he's acknowledging that and that he's not coming out passionately one way or the other before he really gets into it. So I really like that and I really appreciate that. So far, there hasn't been a request for continuance. Usually that's happened before, the deadline. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we'll find out tomorrow.
Robert, I want to ask you more about being in that overflow room, being in the courthouse outside. We had our Nancy Lou out there. You could see the line going around the block. Only 16 people won the lottery. What was it like? What was the energy like? Tell us what it was like to be in that room, because, I think so many people wanted to be in there, and you actually got very, very close. And sometimes I think being in the overflow room, I cover a lot of court cases, as you know, is better because you have a vantage point where the cameras are looking at people sitting in the courtroom as opposed to sitting in the back of the actual courtroom. So what was that like? And then talk to me about your thoughts on what the DA and governor's hopes, how they're going to sign off and if that is really going to happen in your mind.
Well, I felt like I was back in 1993 in July when Eric Lyle Menendez first went on trial. The intensity of the media coverage was really surprising to me, but I understand that everybody has been following the case. Everybody has been talking about the case, but it really felt like deja vu all over again. We were back. I was taken back to 31 years ago when the trial was going on, and I had one of the 12 reserved seats in the courtroom. So I was actually there 20 feet away from the witness stand. And I got to see that powerful testimony of Eric and Lyle Menendez in person. And it's a totally different experience than watching a video on YouTube or watching a clip on Court TV.
Mm-hmm. Alexander, Lyle's wife announced their separation. We want to get to this. The reports of a new girlfriend, true or not, maybe you can tell us that it's bad timing while they're trying to be released, or is it just gossip that the courts won't really care about? What's the real story here?
That's not something that we focus on at all. We're focusing on their rehabilitation, on the resentencing, and on the underlying facts in the habeas and the new evidence in the case. But, the only question is, are these two people who during their time in the most violent place in the United States, they've been to different prisons, and every time they've been to different prisons, the question is, how have they acted? How have they behaved? Have they become part of the problem? Have they become part of that violent culture? And every step along the way, since they were 19 and 21 years old, they have had impeccable records where they make life better everywhere they go. And that's the focus.
Could I get you guys both to do real quick, Alexandra and Robert, what are your predictions of what will happen January 30th, 31st at that hearing? The new DA get on board, Governor grant clemency. Robert, real quick, what do you think?
I think that clemency might not be realistic, but I believe that eventually Eric and Lyle Menendez will be released from prison in 2025. They should be released, and this case needs to end.
Alexandra?
The boys are coming home. Absolutely.
All right. We've got it here on tape. We'll talk to you again soon. Alexandra Kazarian and Robert Rand, we want to thank you very much for your perspective. Appreciate you tonight. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Now, a quick update on another big case we've been following very closely. The death of former One Direction star Liam Payne. TMZ is now reporting that Payne may have been trying to escape from his hotel room when he fell from a third-story balcony in Buenos Aires. Sources tell TMZ that minutes before his death, the singer was causing a disturbance in the lobby and multiple hotel workers carried him up to his room. They say that he used a master key to open the door, the workers did, then brought him inside and removed a mirror from the hall outside of his door. According to a police report, one of those employees called 911 minutes later, telling the dispatcher they were afraid that Payne might try to use the balcony to escape. The report notes that when Payne fell, he was wearing a hat and a bag that he did not have with him when he was carried up to his room, as if he was planning to go somewhere, trying to get away. TMZ says that Payne had used a balcony to escape a hotel room on an earlier occasion in mid-September. Police have now charged 3 people, one of Liam's friends, a waiter, and a former hotel employee, all with supplying him with drugs. Up next, we're going to talk Thanksgiving, turkey for lunch and PB&J for dinner. That is what Thanksgiving holds for Sean Diddy Combs, if he is once again denied bail. But there's still the possibility of the kind of feast that Diddy's used to, or almost. A federal judge has promised a decision any time now. So what's the holdup? We'll take a look when we return. I believe it's Thanksgiving week. You may already be dreading that trip to the in-laws this week, but I guarantee you'll have a better Thanksgiving than Sean Combs. If, and I repeat, if a federal judge turns down his 4th attempt at bail. Now, we expected a decision on Friday, but the judge wanted more time to think about it. So we thought it could come today, but instead it came yet another round of dueling documents from the feds and Diddy's lawyers. Now the judge wants even more submissions from both sides. At issue are Diddy's alleged attempts to influence or intimidate witnesses and or accusers. The defense says he hasn't done that and he won't. Prosecutors say he's been doing it constantly from jail. Joining me now is Maria Cruz Menendez, defense attorney and former federal prosecutor who knows the case, who's been reading the documents. All right, Maria, why are we having this pushed again? I mean, it does need time, right?
Yeah, I think this is an important issue for the judge to determine. At the end of the day, I think it's really difficult for judges to put someone to detain a defendant pre-trial. At the end of the day, though, particularly with a case of this severity, the judge is weighing whether or not he obviously thinks that the defendant is going to flee, in this case Combs, or whether or not Combs is a danger to the community,
right,
as a whole. And so both sides have put very passionate arguments forward. And obviously, whenever there's a situation where you have new information or new legal arguments, the judge has to consider those things. And I think that's what the judge is doing here.
What did you make of the paperwork? You read through it.
I did. A lot of the arguments made by the government is consistent with the arguments they've been making since the beginning. In fact, they're leaning very heavily on the fact that in this type of a case, the presumption, it's a rebuttable presumption, but the presumption is that the court should detain Combs. Mm-hmm. And so what defense counsel has to do is rebut that presumption and present evidence that the government has it wrong at the end of the day. What the government is attempting to do now is to not only demonstrate that he's a risk of flight and that he's a danger to the community, but that continuously, since before even the investigation, Combs has been obstructing justice.
Right. And there's been this whole thing. I was there in court on Friday, and they've been saying, the prosecutors say, look, he's been doing these three-way calls. He's communicating with people, witnesses, people that he's trying to influence. He's calling somebody. They're calling somebody. It's against the rules. He's borrowing other people's phone cards. All of that. That is a big no-no, right?
Well, yes and no, in that if the goal is to obstruct justice, then yes, that's a big no-no. However, from the defense's point of view, Combs is just doing what any defendant should be able to do.
Right.
In the paperwork that was filed today, the argument is that it would be a violation of his First Amendment rights not to be able to defend himself and defend his reputation, and also to be able to assist in his defense.
And what are the chances that we're going to hear something before Thanksgiving? I mean, whether or not he's going to walk or not.
It's hard to tell. I think it's possible that the judge has 2 more days will be able to put in a ruling on that. But also, I don't think that the judge is necessarily focused on whether or not the decision comes down before Thanksgiving. I think the judge is more focused on getting it right.
One of the things we heard on Friday and that we're hearing in the paperwork is that Diddy's team has said that he doesn't have the kind of time or access to prepare for his trial. There's a lot of charges, there's a lot of accusers, but other people do it just fine. Is there any truth to the defense saying that he doesn't have the access and what he needs to do to get ready?
Look, I think it's fair to say that obviously you'd have more access if you were out on bond. However, there are so many different ways that the court can make the defense counsel available to the defendant. There are situations in which a judge will allow meetings happening at various locations, whether it be the courthouse or the jail, to make sure that defense counsel and Combs have enough time to prepare for trial.
Right.
As you mentioned, defendants do it all the time, every single day. Any incarcerated defendant has to work with their counsel in order to prepare for trial. So I don't think that that's necessarily something that's going to sway them.
And the whole thing with the raid that happened in his cell with the legal notes, the handwritten notes that were taken, there's been a lot of back and forth about that. Really quick, your take on that?
Well, I think the judge is going to have to really hear the facts on that. But what's interesting is they were able to use that fact and the fact that Combs had made representations that he had written legal and made it clear that this was legal communications. And then it turned out that his lawyer had to explain, looking back at the evidence, it's not actually true that the word legal was written all over the paperwork beforehand. And so what the government did was use that as another way of showing that Combs is still not following the law and is not listening to his attorneys.
All right. So if he doesn't make it this time, will a 5th bail attempt happen? You can keep trying and trying.
You can keep trying and trying, and he's probably going to go to the Second Circuit and do an appeal and see what the Court of Appeals has to say about it. Even if he doesn't win there, I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to try.
Do you have a prediction?
I think given the seriousness of the offenses and the evidence that the government has proffered, it's unlikely that he's going to be released.
All right. We'll see what happens. We got to go. Leave it there. Maria Cruz Menendez, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time and being in person. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And we've got a tragic update now in the case of Hana Kobayashi. She is the Hawaiian we told you about, the Hawaiian woman who on Friday disappeared after a stopover in Los Angeles on her way to New York. Now, she's been missing for more than 2 weeks now, and her family has been distraught. Yesterday, the body of her father, Ryan Kobayashi, was found outside of a parking structure near the LA airport. Police say he died by suicide. His family says he died of a broken heart. If you or someone you know have thoughts of self-harm, call the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. Just those 3 numbers, 988. any hour of the day. Pick up the phone if you need to. Coming up, when cases go cold, it's often left up to the loved ones to keep the spotlight on the investigation. And when they've been cold for nearly 30 years, that can be a real challenge. My next guest knows it better than anyone else. John Ramsey is still looking for the killer of 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey. Netflix's latest docuseries on her cold case just dropped today, and he joins me next. There are few better ways to get fresh eyes on a cold case than to give it the Netflix treatment. And when that case is the murder of JonBenét Ramsey, there's no better time to look back than now. This Christmas marks 28 years since 6-year-old JonBenét was killed in her family's home in Boulder, Colorado. She was found by her father, John Ramsey, in the basement. Her skull was broken, a wire wrapped around her neck. Police made multiple critical blunders from the very first minutes. That is well known. None bigger than assuming John and Patsy, JonBenét's parents, were the killers. Now, in the brand new Netflix docuseries Cold Case, Who Killed JonBenét Ramsey? It dropped today. John Ramsey talks about what it was like being told he was suspect number one.
I don't know if it was that day or the next day, but and I wouldn't taking calls. You could hardly function. But our friends got a call, and they said, look, this is the fellow that works with you. He said he needs to talk to you. So I answered the phone, and it was one of our employees. He said, I was told by someone inside the system to get this message to you. They believe you killed your daughter, and you need to get the best defense attorney you can get your hands on. And I was just shocked.
Wow. JonBenét's family has long been officially cleared of suspicion. But despite advances in DNA and technology and hopes for independent testing, the little girl's murder is still unsolved today. John Ramsey is here. He joins me now live. John, thank you so much for being here. And again, our sincerest condolences. We are so sorry for your loss. I can't believe it's been 28 years. We are still talking about this because you don't have the answers that you need. So hopefully with Netflix and with more conversations, the lead comes out and we can get you there. The docuseries just dropped today, so let's just ask you and start from the top. What are your hopes from the new attention? Obviously to get a new tip, right?
Well, two things. One is if we keep the case out there in front of the public, hopefully someone comes forward with some information that was substantive. The second reason is that we have been advocating almost from day one that the police accept help from outside their system. They did not have a homicide department. I mean, the mistakes they made are pretty well documented, and we just wanted them to accept help from the outside, and they refused to do that for really up until now, as far as we know. There is some good news, and it appears that the city or whoever oversees the police department is cleaning house. Oversight committee recommended termination of 5 of their 7 detectives for failure to investigate crimes properly, one of which was the fellow that had our case for 25 years. He was more of a roadblock than a help.
Wow.
That was good news. He's gone.
Okay.
The piece of good news is they brought in a new chief from outside the system. And I believe you can't promote from within a dysfunctional organization and hope things will change. They brought someone in from the outside. I've met with the new chief twice. It seems like a pretty solid guy. I like him. Open as much as he feels comfortable being open with me. But we're hoping that new leadership will accept the help that's out there that's been offered, cutting-edge DNA labs. But they have to be asked. They have to be invited to help. They just can't help. And that's a real peculiarity of our system in this country.
Well, did you ask the chief? I mean, I'm sure you had that conversation. Did you say, can you just please ask these independent labs? I mean, my goodness, we keep doing these stories about how these independent labs are helping to solve cold cases. Why aren't they doing it? You must be, I mean, I know that you've been outraged. Did you ask the chief, can you please just invite these people in?
Well, we did. And basically what he said, okay, look, there's some things happening that I can't tell you about.
Okay.
And we don't think DNA technology is there yet. I totally disagree with that. I met with the founders of Othram Labs, which is one of the cutting edge labs that's out there. They'd be happy to help. I sent a letter to the chief based on my meeting with what I learned with Othram, and that is, A, they don't destroy any DNA when they do testing on it anymore, which was one of the concerns. B, they have the ability to separate DNA, mixed DNA samples, which is one of the issues with the sample they got in 1997. They had an unidentified male DNA sample in early 1997. It was mixed apparently with JonBenét's blood DNA. That can now technology-wise be separated. That's huge. And the third thing, they have the ability to do familial genealogy research, which has been wildly successful in solving old cold cases. That's what we're asking the police to do. Go to one of these cutting edge labs, let them do new testing, and they need a new DNA sample. We have a DNA sample, which was obtained in January 1997 of an unidentified male DNA. It's not in the format needed to do this familial genealogy research. It's to be a new format, and that's why we need to do more testing.
What is the next step, John? What happens now? Now that you've had that meeting with the chief, where does this go from here?
Well, we're going to ask for another meeting, and we're going to be a little more forceful in our request. Telling us that there's things happening you can't tell us about is not an acceptable response to the father of a murdered child. I want to know more. What is going on? They had a cold case review that came out of this petition that had 13,000 signatures. It took them a year to get ready to present that case to the cold case review team.
Right.
Cold case review team gave a list of action items. That was a year ago. What's been done with that list? Have you done anything? Have you done them all? I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's just not acceptable.
I understand your frustration. Our audience does too. We have to leave it there. John Ramsey, please come back and let us know when you've had that second meeting, okay? Let us know what happens. We're rooting for you. We want the answers. Everybody does. John Ramsey, thank you so much for being here tonight. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Laura, for having me on.
Thank you, John. All right, still to come. Imagine searching for your biological mother, only to find out she was brutally murdered almost 50 years earlier. And then to learn for most of that time, police were trying to figure out her identity too. It is an amazing story of two investigations that ended up solving two mysteries, one very personal and one that became a Massachusetts legend. After the break, you're going to meet the man who found his mom and may have helped find her killer. That's coming up. Richard Hanchett discovered the identity of his biological mother. She had been dead for decades. She was Ruth Marie Terry, a young Tennessee woman who'd given up her newborn for adoption in Michigan in 1958. Later, police in Massachusetts would know Terry as the Lady of the Dunes, a nameless murder victim found on a Provincetown beach in 1974. Now, her skull had been crushed and her head was almost severed. Her hands were completely severed, so she couldn't be identified by fingerprints or any other way for 48 years. Then in 2022, 4 years after Hanchett's search had led him to Terry's family back in Tennessee, the FBI identified the Lady of the Dunes through forensic genetic genealogy. And then once they had a name, they learned that Terry had a husband with a shady past. A year after that, Terry's husband, now also dead, was officially named her killer. Now, this is an unbelievable tale, and it's now the subject of a true crime series on Oxygen called The Lady of the Dunes, Hunting the Cape Cod Killer.
Everybody knows about the Lady of the Dunes.
This was one of the most notorious unresolved homicides.
It became kind of like folklore. I just always thought of it as an unbelievable ghost story that probably would never be solved.
Someone clearly wanted to hide her identity.
Could she have known too much? Could this have been a mob hit?
We find out who the victim is, and then it's like, okay, now who killed her?
It was a horrible time for my family.
Are you kidding me? What else can go wrong in this case?
I'm not stopping. Anything that could lead to the identification of the Lady of the Dunes was met with resistance.
Why would you throw away the evidence to an unsolved murder?
The police chief said, well, I think I have the serial killer.
I'm joined now on the phone by Richard Hanchett, son of Ruth Marie Terry. Thank you so much for being here tonight and joining us. You know, before all of this came about and your mom actually came to see you the same year she was murdered, 1974, take us back in time and just kind of start at the beginning, how you got involved in this search.
Well, it all started in 2018 when my girlfriend Wendy gave me the Ancestry DNA kit. And when I got it back, I had 58,000 DNA matches. And that's literally where it began. Within, I would say, a couple of days of receiving the information, I found out, my last name was Terry. I met my first cousin online from Tennessee, and then the real journey began. I went down and met my family for a reunion, and right after that, everything kind of, I found out that, Ruth was missing. So some time went on, and then on October, on Halloween of 22, the FBI called and said they had wanted to talk to me. I was a little nervous and went down and talked to them, and come to find out through DNA, they'd matched me with my mom. I was excited at first, thinking I was going to see her. And then they, quickly told me that, oh, no, she'd been a murder victim back in 74. And
my goodness.
It was unbelievable. I'd been having nightmares about it before the FBI called. And after their call and a little bit of thinking, I realized that my nightmares were I was witnessing my mom being murdered. And then I just went through an unbelievable journey of finding her name out and then meeting a medium, Lauren Robbins, and we kind of walked down through the path to, put all the pieces together, basically at the end of my life. It was unbelievable.
Isn't this wild, Richard, that, so many stories we've heard that are connected to these genealogy sites that bring about these answers, but then also lead to more questions. So you talked to us about the day the FBI told you that your mom was, in fact, this notorious case, Lady of the Dunes, and a victim of murder. Sounds like they should have led with that when they first called you. But contaminated DNA, lost physical evidence contributed to the case not being solved for so long. What led to the actual break in the case? It sounds like there were a couple of things that happened. Take us through some of the key points.
Well, one of the main things was a detective, Meredith Lauber, that pretty much gave up her career and future careers to go above her boss and the DA and go directly to the FBI, and they solved the case. You know what I mean? It was a big political situation where they had lost the evidence back in the 80s, and it could have been solved then. And then it was, a political hiding match from that point on of really resolving it. You know what I mean?
Right.
With that new DNA technology, they can literally solve anything.
Right.
You hear almost every week a new story.
We've got to get your people hooked up with John Ramsey. We just had that conversation in our last segment. And just really quickly before I let you go, you recently had a new headstone installed for your mother because it had only been Lady of the Dunes. Tell us really quickly what you did.
I did a GoFundMe, and then after that, we picked out a stone, and we had her picture put on it, and, with the dates, all the important dates are born, when, unfortunately, she was murdered, and then the date of when we identified her, put a name on her. And, quite a few of the important people involved in making that day happen were there. And it was unbelievable. I was there. One of the people was Warren Tobias. He was the chief, one of the chiefs. And me and him were standing there just talking, and it was hard to believe that, it was 50 years that went by, and he'd worked on the case his whole life.
Right.
And that we're standing there at her grave next to each other 50 years later. It's just unbelievable.
It's an incredible story. Richard Hanchett, I've got to leave it there. And everybody can watch this now. Lady of the Dunes, Hunting the Cape Cod Killer. It premieres on Oxygen Friday, November 29th, and concludes Saturday, November 30th. So a really incredible story for you to check out. Thank you so much for being here. And still to come, a doctor in Arkansas is facing a hearing after the medical board saw some shocking video. He's in trouble. The self-proclaimed naked doctor is seen strutting around his family practice wearing nothing but a baseball cap. You see it there. We got a blur going on. He's also accused of performing a sex act on an employee/patient. All of those wild details coming up next. A doctor in Arkansas seen walking around his medical clinic naked has had his medical license suspended, but not for the nudity, for the sex. Surveillance video from the 2019 incident was sent to the state medical board. It allegedly shows Dr. David Defendants performing sex acts on his staff at work. Before I show it to you, I want to warn you, it's blurred, but it's graphic. You can see the doctor walking from patient room to patient room wearing only a baseball cap. There he is. There he goes. And then this shot of the doctor allegedly pleasuring himself on an employee who's also one of his patients. The video was sent to the board by an employee who accuses Defendants of grooming and harassing his workers. The board responded with a statement saying the perverse behavior leads to concerns. That's it for us. We'll see you tomorrow night on Banfield.
Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to NewsNation. So let's talk turkey. My mother overseeing the making of her famous breadless stuffing. A friend of mine, more than one actually, getting divorced. One is having a surprise baby. Someone has cancer. Another one actually beat a bad cancer, and their kid found out they do not have the cancer gene. Two people I really cared about are gone. There's some new babies. One guy just found out they had major blockages in two arteries, and they got it fixed, so they're okay. One is so pumped about their son moving home. Another one can't get theirs to move out. A third is not sending their kid to college, choosing